Okay, so today we're diving into an agency that, honestly, most people probably haven't heard much about, but it's fascinating. The Diplomatic Security Service, or DSS.
Right. And what's really interesting is their unique position. They're part law enforcement, part foreign service.
Exactly. And they're everywhere, operating in, what, over 170 countries? Pretty amazing reach.
It really is. And it highlights that constant link between, diplomacy and security on the ground. They're not just chasing criminals. Their work is baked right into U.S. foreign policy.
Absolutely. And the material we've got gives us this great, really comprehensive view from how they started, kind of obscurely, to the complex outfit they are now.
Yeah, it's a deep look.
So our mission here is basically to pull out the most important bits, the surprising stuff, the history, the structure, what they actually do. It's about understanding this, well, often unseen role they play in global stability, international justice, all that.
Sounds good. Where do we start? The beginning.
Let's do it. Take us back to the origins.
Okay, so the source material really puts us in the World War I era. I think 1916, the U.S. is still neutral, officially anyway.
But things are heating up.
Definitely. Espionage, passport fraud. It was a big problem, especially in places like New York. German and Austrian agents were quite active.
Like something out of a spy novel.
Or
And Secretary of State Robert Lansing saw this coming.
he did. He saw the threat. His first idea, apparently, was some kind of internal State Department law enforcement group. But, well, that didn't fly immediately.
So he pivoted.
He did. He got President Wilson's okay, and in April 1916, set up the Bureau of Secret Intelligence.
Bureau of Secret Intelligence. Sounds appropriately cloak and dagger.
Right. And it was described as an off-the-books adjunct, very hush-hush. Part of the Division of Information, which was also called the Office of the Chief Special Agent, tells you something about how sensitive it was from day one.
So who are these first agents? They couldn't just magic up experienced spies, could they?
No, exactly. Lansing had to be resourceful. He pulled agents from the U.S. Secret Service. These guys knew counterfeit currency, a useful skill, apparently.
Okay, I can see that connection.
And, maybe more surprisingly, from the U.S. Postal Inspection Service.
The post office. Really?
Yeah, because they had the best forensic lab in the country back then. It's kind of wild how they cobbled together this expertise out of necessity. Shows the urgency.
Talk about thinking outside the box. So these early agents, what were they doing day to day? Chasing spies, stopping fake passports?
Pretty much. Counterespionage, counterintelligence, definitely passport fraud. And protecting diplomats, too, both American and foreign ones here in the U.S.
And that role grew when the U.S. actually entered the war.
It did. Their duties expanded then to include interning enemy diplomats and arranging exchanges. Standard wartime stuff for diplomats. But now they were handling the security side.
It's really clear how that wartime context just shaped everything for them initially.
Yeah.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. What happened after WWI? How did the agency evolve?
Well, after the war, you had new laws pop up. Passports needed for citizens coming back, visas for resident aliens. So naturally, investigating passport and visa fraud became a major focus.
Makes sense.
And this is also when State Department agents started getting into protecting distinguished visitors coming to the U.S.
So the protection side starts developing early on. And the name changed too, right? It wasn't always the DSS.
No, the Bureau of Secret Intelligence eventually became the Office of Security, or just SY for short.
DSY.
And structurally, it sat under the Administration Bureau within the State Department's management side.
And they stayed busy between the wars, still dealing with fraud and security threats.
Oh, yeah. The source mentions them tackling major passport fraud linked to communists and Nazis during that period. Very similar role during World War II as well, again with the internment and exchange of enemy diplomats.
History repeating itself there.
And crucially, after WWII, we see the first steps towards expanding overseas. That's when the Regional Security Officer, the RSO position, was created.
The RSO. Right, we'll definitely circle back to that role. Now, the source mentioned something called the Otepka controversy in the 60s. What was that about?
Yeah, that was an internal dust-up. Otepka was a deputy director in SY. He basically went to a Senate subcommittee with concerns about security clearance processes in the State Department, felt they were too weak.
Whistleblower situation.
Kind of. It led to him being removed and eventually fired by Secretary of State Dean Rusk. It just shows, the internal politics and sensitivities they sometimes navigated, not just external threats.
Right, internal pressures too.
Yeah.
Now, it seems the agency stayed pretty small for a long time.
Yeah, remarkably so. Around 300 agents until the early 70s, with more than half usually posted overseas.
But then things changed dramatically.
They did. The early 80s were a turning point. The catalyst, sadly, was the 1983 bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, a real tragedy.
A devastating event, and that led to a major rethink of security.
Absolutely. It prompted the Inman Report, which looked into the bombing and strongly recommended a major upgrade to State Department security across the board.
And that report directly led to the DSS we know today.
Directly, it resulted in Congress formally establishing the Diplomatic Security Service DSS in 1985.
So 1985 is the key date for the modern DSS, but it's important, as the source notes, to distinguish DSS from DS, right?
Yes, definitely. DS is the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. That's the bigger entity, headed by an Assistant Secretary of State. DSS, the Diplomatic Security Service, is the law enforcement arm within DS.
Got it. So DS is the bureau, DSS is the service doing the operational law enforcement and security work.
Exactly. Think of DS as the whole security infrastructure, and DSS as the primary team carrying out the missions.
That clears it up. Okay, let's talk structure. How is this organization actually put together? Who's in charge day to day?
Right at the top, you have the Assistant Secretary of State for Diplomatic Security overseeing the whole bureau, DS. Reporting to the Assistant Secretary is the director of the DSS. And that director also holds the title of Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, or PDAS.
PDS. So a senior role underlining their importance, but still reporting up.
Precisely. A clear chain of command.
And the agents themselves, how many are there, roughly, and where do they work?
The numbers have fluctuated. Big growth after 85, then some cuts in the mid-90s. Lately, the authorized number has been over 2,200, though the actual count in 2022 was just under 2,000.
Still a significant number.
It is, and here's the really key thing. Most DSS special agents are both Foreign Service specialists and federal law enforcement officers.
That dual designation again.
Exactly. And it's not just a title. It means they have to serve multi-year tours overseas. It's part of the job description. That's a major difference from, say, the FBI or DEA.
That mandatory overseas element is huge. It must shape their whole perspective.
Totally. They bring that diplomatic understanding, that cultural sensitivity, alongside the cop's skills. It's a unique blend, really fundamental to how they operate.
But they do work stateside, too. Between those overseas tours?
Oh, yeah. When they're not posted abroad, they're either at DSS headquarters that's in Arlington, Virginia, or in one of the, I think, 33 field offices across the U.S.
And what are they doing domestically?
A mix of things. Investigating transnational crime that touches the U.S., passport and visa fraud, protecting visiting foreign dignitaries, helping track down fugitives, and doing tons of background checks for state and other agencies.
Okay, and let's revisit that RSO role, the Regional Security Officer. What exactly do they do at an embassy?
The RSO is the top DSS agent at a U.S. embassy or consulate. Basically, the ambassador's chief advisor on all things law enforcement and security.
The go-to security person.
Right. And interestingly, back in 1999, their reporting structure changed. They started reporting directly to the Deputy Chief of Mission, the DCM.
Why was that significant?
It put security right near the top of the embassy leadership structure, made it clear that security wasn't just an add-on, but integral to the diplomatic mission itself, a big shift in emphasis.
Makes sense. Okay, origins, evolution, structure check. Now for the really exciting part. What do these agents actually do, their missions? Protection seems like a big one.
It's certainly one of the most visible. They protect the Secretary of State, obviously, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, other very senior diplomats.
High-level protection details.
Yes. And they also protect visiting foreign dignitaries. That list is pretty impressive. Heads of state, government ministers, sometimes royalty, major political figures.
The source mentions people like the Dalai Lama, Princess Diana, Boris Yeltsin. That's a wide range.
It really is. And it's not just bodyguarding. They advise the ambassadors on overall security planning, manage security for big international events hosted by the U.S.
So creating that secure bubble for diplomacy to happen.
Exactly. They're also responsible for protecting foreign embassies and consulates here in the U.S., though they often team up with others for that, like the Secret Service Uniform Division or local police like the NYPD.
And the UN General Assembly every year in New York must be huge for them.
Oh, absolutely massive. Hundreds of foreign dignitaries descend on NYC, and DSS plays a central role in coordinating their protection. A huge logistical operation.
Interesting note, though, that DSS used to be the main agency protecting visiting heads of state.
Yeah, that changed under Nixon in the early 70s. He gave the primary responsibility to the U.S. Secret Service via executive order, but DSS still plays a really important support role.
Got it. Okay, beyond protection, investigations are a massive part of their job. The source stresses they're a full-fledged law enforcement agency.
Absolutely. Not just security guards. They conduct complex international criminal investigations.
And the main focus there is passport and visa fraud.
That's their bread and butter, yes. And while it might sound like, paperwork crime, it's critical.
Why so critical?
Because fake documents are the key that unlocks so many other things for criminals and terrorists. Getting to the country, establishing fake identities, money laundering, it often starts with a fraudulent passport or visa.
Right, it's the gateway. What kind of fraud schemes do they see?
All sorts. Sham marriages just to get citizenship are common for visa fraud. People creating totally fake identities to get in illegally. For passport fraud, sometimes it's aliens already here trying to pose as Americans, maybe using the identities of people who've died.
Wow, elaborate stuff. And they don't just investigate outsiders, right? They look into State Department personnel too.
Correct. That includes sensitive stuff like potential espionage by state employees or other kinds of misconduct or illegal acts. These cases often involve tight cooperation with DOJ and the FBI.
That must be delicate work.
Very. And overseas, they have this unique, tough job of investigating things like spousal or child abuse involving U.S. personnel. Because of diplomatic immunity, the host country usually won't touch those cases.
Ah, so DSS has to step in.
Right. Plus, they do a staggering number of background checks every year. Tens of thousands for State Department employees and contractors, and even for other federal agencies needing clearances.
That's a huge security function for the whole government.
Yeah.
The source also mentioned overseas criminal investigators, OCIs. What's their specific niche?
OCIs are DSS agents with extra training in consular work. They're based in consular sections overseas, working closely with the fraud prevention units there.
So right on the front lines of visa and passport issues abroad.
Exactly. They focus on that fraud, but also related transnational crime terrorism links. Human trafficking, organized crime rings try to exploit the visa system.
Yeah.
And they liaise constantly with CBP and HSI back at the U.S. border, sharing intel, coordinating cases.
So investigators working both ends of the problem, domestically and overseas. Okay, another big mission, counterintelligence.
Yes, a huge part of their mandate. They run a pretty robust CI program aimed at stopping foreign intelligence services from targeting State Department people, facilities, information, anywhere in the world.
How do they do that?
They conduct CI inquiries, counter-espionage investigations, often working hand-in-glove with the FBI on those, following specific legal guidelines about who does what.
And it's proactive, too, trying to prevent spying before it happens.
Definitely. Lots of security awareness briefings for personnel, training folks on what to look out for, and they have security engineers, technical specialists who sweep for bugs, sophisticated eavesdropping devices, all that.
Trying to stay ahead of the curve, technically.
Right. And the source gives a chilling example of why it matters. The Walter Kendall Myers case in 2009.
What happened there?
He was a State Department employee caught spying for Cuba for nearly 30 years. It just shows the persistent threat they're up against.
30 years. Wow. That's incredible. And their counter-threat work extends to terrorism, too.
Yes, absolutely. DSS agents are embedded in joint terrorism task forces, JTTFs, all over the U.S.
Working alongside FBI and others.
Exactly. And within DSS, there's the Office of Protective Intelligence and Investigations, PII. They specifically track and investigate threats against the Secretary of State and U.S. diplomatic missions.
So threat analysis and investigation combined.
Right. And when an attack does happen on an embassy or consulate, DSS personnel are often the first investigators on the scene. Plus, they run the Rewards for Justice program.
Ah, the RFJ. Offering money for tips on terrorists.
That's the one. Big rewards for info that helps prevent attacks or catch those responsible. It's a major counterterrorism tool for them. They were even involved in the investigation after the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013.
It really underscores the breadth of their investigative work. Are there other types of investigations they handle?
Yes, things that might seem more routine, but are important for personnel security. Crimes against State Department employees or their families overseas, theft, assault, sadly, even murder sometimes.
And investigating those overseas must be complex.
Extremely. You're working with foreign police, navigating different legal systems, sometimes in places that aren't exactly friendly. The source mentions the case involving a CIA station chief in Algeria, highlights the kind of tricky, sensitive situations they can get drawn into.
Definitely complex. Now, this next area really sounds like Hollywood tracking down fugitives who fled the U.S.
It definitely has that dramatic element. DSS plays a big role here. They're tasked with finding and helping apprehend fugitives who've skipped the country to avoid prosecution.
How successful are they?
Pretty successful. They worked very closely with the U.S. Marshals Service on this, and the source says they help bring back around 300 fugitives to the U.S. every year. It shows their global reach you can run, but maybe not hide.
The list of examples is incredible. Ramzi Youssef, the '93 World Trade Center bomber, caught in Pakistan.
A huge one, back in '95.
Then child sex offenders caught in Brazil, Peru, murder suspects in Belize, Guatemala.
Yeah, Donald Yaffe, George Alvin Vist, Derek Yancey, Ariel Patrick.
Even a former CIA officer, Andrew Warren, caught domestically. A Hells Angel murder suspect, Paul Eichscheid, found in Argentina.
That's right.
An FBI top 10 fugitive, Eric Toth, tracked down in Nicaragua. And more recently, Caitlin Armstrong, the cyclist murder case, found in Costa Rica.
Exactly. And others for fraud, assault. Michael McNulty in Belize, John Gorham in Maryland, Dario Tomas in the Philippines. It just goes on.
It really paints a picture of a relentless, worldwide pursuit. Amazing work.
It really underscores their international network and their law enforcement clout.
Absolutely. Now, we talked about RSOs, but let's broaden that out. The overseas mission for DSS agents in general, it's obviously central to their identity.
It is. Because they're foreign service, those overseas tours are mandatory, a core part of the career path. You usually start as an assistant RSO, an RSO, then work your way up to deputy RSO or RSO.
Then even the agents based stateside get sent overseas sometimes.
Oh yeah, for temporary duty, TDY. Could be for a protection detail, helping out with a big event, providing surge support after a crisis, or running training programs. That huge UN General Assembly deployment is a prime example. Lots of domestic agents go TDY to New York for that.
And we have to acknowledge this overseas work carries real risks.
Tragically, yes, the source is clear. 4 DSS special agents have died in the line of duty since '85.
That's a heavy toll.
It is. And even more locally engaged staff, the foreign nationals working security at embassies and others supporting the mission have been killed. Over 130, the source says, especially in places like Iraq. It's a constant reminder of the dangers they face.
A sobering reality of their service. We also touched on the Overseas Criminal Investigations Division, the OCIs. Their role seems very proactive, going after crime at the source.
Very much so. The OCI division manages all the investigative assets abroad. They have agents, those OCIs, embedded in over 120 posts in 85 countries. The goal is to tackle transnational crime before it hits the U.S.
Building partnerships overseas to fight crime globally?
Exactly. Working with foreign police, sharing intel, targeting everything from visa fraud networks to human traffickers to terrorist financing, right where it originates.
And beyond crime, DSS even gets involved in securing massive international events like the Olympics.
That's right. When the U.S. has a big presence at an Olympics, a DSS agent is often appointed as the Olympic security coordinator.
What does that involve?
It's a huge liaison role. They coordinate between all the different U.S. federal agencies involved in security, FBI, Secret Service, etc., and the host country's security forces. For anything related to the U.S. delegation's security, basically everyone reports to that DSS agent.
Wow, so they're really in the driver's seat for U.S. security at the Games. That's a major responsibility.
It highlights their expertise in managing these incredibly complex, high-stakes international security operations.
Okay, given everything they do, the global reach, the risks, the complexity, it's probably no shock that getting hired by DSS is tough.
Extremely tough.
Ah.
The source calls it one of the most selective hiring processes in the federal government, maybe even all of law enforcement.
Pretty selective.
The acceptance rate is thought to be under 1%.
Wow, less than 1%.
Yeah. Candidates go through this intense multi-stage process. Written exams, multiple interviews, a rigorous physical fitness test, a really thorough medical exam. You have to be fit for duty anywhere in the world.
Worldwide availability. Makes sense for the foreign service aspect.
Exactly. And then there's the background investigation. It's exhaustive, aiming for that top-secret sensitive compartmented information clearance, TSSCI.
Access to the really classified stuff.
Right. And even after all that, there's a final suitability review by a foreign service panel. It's a gauntlet.
What are the basic requirements to even apply?
You need at least a bachelor's degree, though many agents have master's degrees or law degrees. And you generally have to be under 37 when you apply, unless you have veterans preference.
Yeah. And if you make it through that tiny 1% door, the training sounds just as intense.
It is. Nearly 9 months long. Starts with the Criminal Investigator Training Program, CITP, down at FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Centers.
Standard for federal agents?
Right. Then they do the DSS Basic Special Agent course, BSAC,
Hmm.
plus specialized diplomatic security and foreign service courses at the Foreign Service Institute.
And they have to keep qualifying with their weapons.
Yeah, regular firearms qualifications throughout their career. Typically, after all that training, new agents get assigned to a domestic field office for their first tour before heading overseas.
Speaking of weapons, what kind of firearms are they carrying?
Standard issue is usually Glock pistols. They also use submachine guns like the Colt SMG or the Heckler & Koch MP5, good for close protection work,
And for longer range.
rifles like the Colt M4 carbine, and in really high threat posts, think active war zones, they can be authorized heavier stuff. M249 light machine guns, M240 medium machine guns, even the .50 caliber M2 Browning, they get special training before deploying with those, obviously.
That's some serious firepower. Reflects the environments they work in.
Okay, wrapping up, the source briefly mentions leadership history and those tragic fatalities.
Yeah, the leadership titles have evolved from the Secretary of State having direct control way back to special assistants, chiefs, directors of SY, and now the director of DSS reporting to the assistant secretary. The source lists some past directors.
And the fatalities, just to reiterate those numbers, 4 DSS special agents killed in the line of duty since 1985. And importantly, over 130 locally engaged staff and other personnel killed while supporting the diplomatic security mission globally. Their sacrifice is crucial to remember, too.
Absolutely crucial. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive on the Diplomatic Security Service. As we wrap up, what are the main things that really stick out to you?
For me, it's just that truly unique blend. The way they merge law enforcement, security, and diplomacy isn't like any other federal agency. From those secret WWI roots to today's global presence. Protecting diplomats, chasing fugitives worldwide, investigating complex transnational crime. It's just indispensable work, even if it's often behind the scenes.
I agree. And for me, that dual-hatted nature, being both a cop and a diplomat, with that mandatory overseas service that's really the defining and maybe surprising characteristic, it shapes everything they do. Or, thinking way back, that initial scramble using counterfeit experts and postal forensics for counterspying. That's pretty amazing adaptability right from the start.
Definitely. And this all matters to you, the listener, because their work directly impacts things we often take for granted. International security, the trustworthiness of passports and visas that let us travel and trade, bringing criminals to justice across borders. It all contributes to global stability. Understanding their role helps understand how that complex system works, or sometimes doesn't work.
Well said. So here's a final thought to chew on. The world keeps getting more complex, threats are constantly shifting, everything's more interconnected. How does an agency like DSS adapt? What might their role look like in, say, 10 or 20 years? What new challenges, cyber threats, disinformation campaigns impacting security, climate change, refugees, and passport issues might they face? Something to think about.